My name is Tina S. Mejia, and I am 28 years old. You're lucky I even pick up your calls. He said it casually, not angry, not joking either, just flat, like he was stating a fact about the weather. I smiled when he said it. That was my reflex when I didn't want someone to see they'd landed a hit. I made a light joke, told him I'd let him go, and hung up. But that sentence didn't hang up with the call. It stayed with me, looping quietly in my head for the next 2 weeks. For context, we'd been together a little over a year. We lived separately, talked every day, saw each other most weekends, or at least we used to. This happened on a Tuesday night. I'd called him after work like I always did. Nothing dramatic. I just wanted to tell him about my day and hear about his. The phone rang longer than usual. Then he finally answered with a sigh. "What?" he said. I laughed it off and asked if I was interrupting something. "Yeah," he replied. "My life." Then came the line. "You're lucky I even pick up your calls." The thing is, it wasn't new behavior. It was just the clearest version of it so far. Over the last few months, everything I did seemed to irritate him. If I texted good morning, he'd respond hours later with busy. If I didn't text, he'd accuse me of not trying. If I asked to see him, he'd say I was being clingy. If I didn't, he'd ask why I was distant. He criticized how I talked, how I dressed, how I chewed, how I parked my car. He corrected me in front of his friends, rolled his eyes when I told stories, made jokes at my expense, then called me sensitive when I didn't laugh hard enough. And yet, somehow I kept calling, kept apologizing, kept trying to get back to the version of him I met at the beginning, the version that sounded interested. That night, after he said that line, something shifted. Not dramatically. No anger, no confrontation, just quiet. I didn't call him the next day or the day after that. I figured he wouldn't even notice. Day one of not calling felt strange but manageable. I caught myself reaching for my phone out of habit, then stopping. I told myself I was just busy, which for once was actually true. Day two felt quieter. Not peaceful, just empty, in a way I hadn't noticed before. No passive-aggressive texts, no sighs on the other end of the line, no feeling like I was interrupting his existence just by wanting to talk. He didn't reach out. That part surprised me more than I expected. By day 3, I started replaying our last few conversations in my head. Not just the big moments, but the small ones. The way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence, how he'd check his phone while I was talking, then say, "Sorry, what?" without actually waiting for me to repeat myself. I remembered the time I showed up 10 minutes early to pick him up, and he snapped, "God, you're always so eager. Relax." Like caring was some embarrassing flaw I needed to outgrow. By day 4, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't anxious. Normally, silence from him would make my stomach twist. I'd assume I'd done something wrong. I'd send a, "Hey, everything okay?" text just to break the tension. I'd apologize preemptively for things I didn't even understand yet. This time, none of that happened. I still missed him, but it felt different. Less like panic, more like distance. That was when it hit me. I hadn't stopped calling to make a point. I'd stopped because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling wanted. By day 5, he finally noticed. He texted, "Wow, guess you're mad at me now." I stared at the message longer than I needed to. It wasn't, "Hey, are you okay?" It wasn't, "Sorry if I was harsh." It wasn't even, "I miss you." It was an accusation, framed like a joke, but sharpened enough to cut. I typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them, and finally sent something simple. "Not mad. Just giving you space." He didn't reply for hours. When he finally did, it was just, "Okay." No follow-up, no call, no curiosity. That was when something clicked that I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. The silence wasn't punishment, it was relief. And apparently, it was bothering him a lot more than it was bothering me. Day 6 was the first time he tried to bait me. Mid-afternoon, he sent a selfie. Nothing special, just him in the car, sunglasses on, lips slightly pursed. No caption, no context. Just dropped into the chat like a hook. Normally, I would have responded instantly, told him he looked good, asked where he was going. Tried to restart whatever invisible countdown timer I was always racing against. This time, I didn't. I saw the message, I put my phone down. I finished what I was doing. An hour passed, then 2. By the time I finally replied with a neutral, "Hope your day's going okay," he was already typing. "So now you're dry too. Did I do something or are you just being weird on purpose? Because this is honestly immature." That word again. Immature. His favorite way to shut things down without actually addressing them. I read the messages without feeling the usual spike of anxiety. No urge to defend my tone. No rush to explain myself. I just answered calmly. I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just matching the energy you asked for. He didn't like that. He called me immediately. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up on the third. What is going on with you? He demanded. You don't call, you barely text, and now you're acting all detached. I almost laughed at the irony. Almost. I reminded him of what he'd said the week before, about me being lucky he even picked up my calls. I kept my voice steady, not accusatory, just factual. There was a pause, then he scoffed. Oh my God, you're still on that. I was joking. You take everything so seriously. Of course, a joke. Everything hurtful was always a joke once it had consequences. He went on about how stressful his life was, how everyone needed something from him, how exhausting it was to deal with other people's emotions all the time, including mine. That's when I noticed something important. He never asked how I was doing, not once. The call ended with him saying, I just don't like this version of you. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. Not angry, not sad, just clear. For the first time, I could see the pattern without being inside it, how my attention made him feel powerful, how my silence made him uneasy, how the balance only worked when I was the one reaching. By day 7, the quiet had become noticeable enough that other people commented on it. A friend joked that I sounded lighter on the phone, like I'd finally gotten a full night's sleep. Even I noticed it in small ways. How I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes, how my shoulders didn't tense when it buzzed. He, on the other hand, was unraveling in stages. He started watching my stories again, every single one, within minutes. He didn't reply, didn't react, just watched, like he needed proof I still existed in his orbit. Then came the vague posts on his end. Funny how people switch up when they don't get what they want. Protecting my peace lately. Some people don't know what they have. Those weren't for me directly. They were for the version of me who would panic and reach out just to reassure him he was still in control. I didn't. That's when he tried something new. Late that night, almost midnight, my phone lit up again. I saw someone today who asked about you. Made me realize how much you've changed. He let that sit for a moment, then followed it with, you used to care more. It was the kind of message designed to land soft but sting later. The kind that used to pull me right back into apologizing for existing. I stared at the screen, thinking about all the times I cared quietly, all the rides I gave, plans I rearranged, apologies I offered just to keep things smooth. All the ways caring had slowly turned into compliance. I typed back, I still care. I just don't feel like begging to be tolerated anymore. He didn't respond. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from him, all between 6:30 and 7. He knew I was asleep then. It felt intentional, like he wanted to disrupt my routine the way I used to let him disrupt my peace. When I finally called him back later that afternoon, he answered immediately. So you do know how to use your phone, he said, smug and sharp at the same time. I told him calmly that I wasn't doing this back and forth anymore, that I needed consistency, not comments about how lucky I was to exist in his schedule. He went quiet, then defensive, then annoyed. This is dramatic, he said. You're acting like I'm some villain. I didn't argue. I just said, I'm acting like someone who's tired. There was a long pause after that, long enough that I could hear his breathing, and for the first time he sounded unsure, not angry, not dismissive, scared that the dynamic he relied on was slipping away. He hung up shortly after without saying much. 2 days later, he showed up at my door. It was a Sunday evening, quiet. I'd just finished cooking and was sitting on the couch when I heard the knock. Not polite, sharp and urgent, like whoever it was didn't plan on leaving without being acknowledged. When I opened the door, there he was. Red-eyed, mascara smudged under one eye, a hoodie I'd never seen before hanging off his shoulders, like he'd grabbed it on the way out. He didn't say hi, didn't apologize. He just asked, "Can I come in?" I hesitated. That alone seemed to throw him off. I stepped aside and he walked past me like he used to, straight to the couch, dropping his bag on the floor like it belonged there. "I don't understand what's happening," he said, voice cracking. "You just stopped." I leaned against the counter instead of sitting next to him. That felt important. Space I hadn't taken before. He went on about how hard his week had been, how everyone kept disappointing him, how he felt abandoned. Every sentence was about his feelings, his stress, his confusion. Finally, he looked at me and asked, "Why didn't you chase me?" That was the moment, not the tears, not the shaking voice, that question. I told him the truth, that chasing someone who treats you like a nuisance eventually feels humiliating. That when he said I was lucky he even picked up my calls, something in me shut off, quietly, permanently. He shook his head, wiping his face. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it like that, I replied. He tried to move closer. I didn't move. I could see the frustration spark when he realized I wasn't folding. The tears slowed. His tone shifted. So what, he said. You're just done now. I thought about all the nights I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head, all the times I'd been afraid to stand up for myself, and I realized I didn't feel afraid at all. I didn't stop calling to punish you, I said. I stopped because I finally listened. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're really doing this, he muttered. You're just giving up. I smiled, not smug, not angry, just tired. I'm choosing myself. He didn't cry after that. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and said, You'll regret this. Maybe. But as I closed the door behind him, all I felt was calm. And for the first time in a year, that felt like enough. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I locked the door, leaned my forehead against it for a second, not in sadness, but in finality. Like closing a book I already knew the ending to. For about 12 hours there was silence. Real silence. No buzzing phone. No passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. I slept better than I had in months. Then the noise came back, just not from him directly. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages from mutual friends. Hey, are you okay? Lauren seems really upset. Did something happen? I didn't respond right away, because I already knew the version of the story she was telling. I'd heard it before. Whenever we had even the smallest disagreement, I was emotionally unavailable. I shut down instead of communicating. I walked away when things got hard. The pattern was familiar enough to feel scripted. By mid-afternoon, she'd finally texted me herself. I can't believe you embarrassed me like that. That was her takeaway. Not that she'd hurt me, not that something had broken, that I embarrassed her by not playing my role. I asked how I embarrassed her. You let me cry alone, she replied. Do you know how that makes you look? There it was again. Optics, image. How things looked mattered more than how they felt. I told her I wasn't interested in arguing through text, that if she wanted to talk, it needed to be respectful and honest. She sent a voice memo. Her tone was calm now. Too calm. The kind of calm she used when she thought she had the upper hand. She said she'd forgiven me for disappearing. Said relationships take work, and sometimes one person has to be the bigger one. She said she was willing to give us another chance if I promised not to shut her out like that again. Not a single apology, just terms. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. That night, she posted a story of herself out with friends. Loud bar, big smiles, caption about healing. She wanted me to see it, wanted me to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Instead, I noticed something else. She kept checking her phone. I knew because one of her friends accidentally sent me a snap meant for their group chat. Lauren in the background, refreshing her screen, pretending not to care. That's when it really hit me. She wasn't upset that I'd stopped calling. She was upset that I'd stopped orbiting. 2 days later, she showed up again. This time, she wasn't crying. She was angry. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. Same knock, same urgency. When I opened it, she stepped inside without waiting, voice already sharp. You don't get to rewrite the relationship and walk away like you're some victim. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. She hated that posture, said it made me look closed off. I kept it anyway. She paced my living room, talking fast about how people were asking questions, how she looked stupid crying at my place, how unfair it was that I decided things without her. You don't get to decide, she snapped. We're done. That's not how this works. I told her calmly that I wasn't deciding for her. I was deciding for me. She laughed, disbelieving. So that's it. You're just done trying. I thought about all the effort I'd poured in, all the times I'd swallowed words to keep peace, all the nights I'd felt small and told myself it was normal. I stopped trying to convince someone to like me, I said. That's not the same thing. That's when she went low. She brought up my insecurities, my past, things I'd told her late at night when I trusted her. She said I was afraid of being alone, that I'd never do better, that she was the best I was going to get. A week ago, that would have crushed me. This time, it just sounded desperate. I looked at her and realized something quietly devastating. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of herself that felt important because I was always reaching. When she finally left, slamming the door behind her, I stood there for a long moment, not shaking, not crying, just breathing. For the first time, the space felt like mine. The week after that was quieter than I expected. Not empty, settled, no surprise visits, no midnight texts disguised as concern, no vague posts aimed in my direction. It felt like she'd finally decided to disappear, not in a graceful way, more like retreating to regroup. I told myself it was over. Then Friday night came. My phone buzzed with a long message, paragraphs stacked on top of each other, the kind she used when she wanted control back, but needed to look reasonable doing it. She said she'd been reflecting. Said she realized she'd been harsh sometimes. Said relationships weren't perfect and people say things they don't mean. Then came the pivot. She said my silence had hurt her deeply. That disappearing without warning was cruel. That I'd made her feel disposable. That if I'd just communicated instead of pulling away, none of this would have happened. I read it slowly, twice. It was almost impressive how she managed to apologize without apologizing, how every sentence curved back to how my reaction was the real problem. She ended it with, "I just don't recognize you anymore." I almost replied, almost explained, almost fell back into the habit of softening myself so she wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. Instead, I asked myself one simple question. Did I feel lighter without her? The answer came immediately. Yes. I typed one sentence. I didn't disappear. I stopped overextending myself. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Her reply came fast. Wow, so cold. You've really changed. Cold, detached, different. Funny how those words only showed up once I stopped being available on demand. She sent another message, shorter this time. If you walk away like this, don't expect me to be here when you realize you messed up. I locked my phone and didn't check it again that night. The next morning, I woke up to a missed call from an unknown number. No voicemail. Then another. Then another. I didn't need to guess who it was. I checked social media later and saw she'd posted a story from a cafe I used to take her to. Same table, same angle. Caption. Some people only value you when you stop giving. For the first time, that was true. Just not in the way she meant. That evening, the knocking started again. Not angry this time, panicked. I almost didn't answer the door, not because I was afraid, but because I already knew nothing she said would change what had settled in me. When I opened it, she looked undone. Not performative, not dramatic, just genuinely shaken. Her eyes were swollen. She was clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I don't know how to fix this," she said quietly. That was new. I stepped aside and she came in slower this time, like she wasn't sure she still belonged there. She didn't sit. She stood in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself. "I didn't think you'd actually be okay without me," she admitted. "You always needed me more." That sentence landed heavier than all the insults before it. "That wasn't love," I said. "That was imbalance." She nodded, tears spilling over. She started listing things she'd do differently. Promises, adjustments, softer words, more appreciation, all the things I'd asked for months ago, now arriving far too late. I listened, really listened, and felt nothing. No anger, no pull, just clarity. That was when I understood it fully. The relationship hadn't ended when I stopped calling. It ended when I stopped hoping she'd change. "I'm not angry," I told her. "I'm just done." She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time, not as someone to manage or correct, but as someone leaving. "So this is it," she whispered. I nodded. She didn't threaten. She didn't insult me. She cried quietly for a minute, then walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned and said, "I really thought you'd come back." "I came back to myself," I replied. She left without another word. It's been a few weeks now. No contact, no late-night messages, no just checking in texts dressed up as concern. Just quiet, consistent distance. I kept waiting for the regret to hit. The wave everyone warns you about. It never came. What came instead were small moments of relief. Waking up without that familiar weight in my chest. Making plans without wondering if they'd annoy someone. Saying what I meant without rehearsing first. I ran into her once by accident at the grocery store. She looked put together again, polished, like she'd rebuilt the version of herself that never needs anyone. We nodded at each other and kept walking. As I turned down the next aisle, I noticed something that surprised me. I didn't feel smaller. She once told me I was lucky she even picked up my calls. Turns out, I was lucky I stopped making them. Not because it hurt her, because it saved me.